With economic uncertainty rising, interest rates at multi-year highs, and property prices already starting to soften in some markets, a lot of first home buyers are asking, should I wait or should I act now? The government's first home buyer scheme lets you buy a home with just a 5% deposit without paying lenders' mortgage insurance, which could save you tens of thousands of dollars, anywhere from $15,000 to upwards of $30,000. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly what the first home guarantee scheme is, how you can qualify for it, and why it is important to consider acting during this market if you're a first home buyer looking to buy. I'm Diana Hamad, mortgage broker and ex-banker who's structured over $500 million in financing. Let's get straight into it. Now, what exactly is the first home guarantee? If you've never heard of it before, or if you've heard of it and you're not sure what it is, it's a government scheme run by Housing Australia that eligible first home buyers to purchase a property with a deposit as low as 5% without having to pay LMI. Now, normally you need to pay LMI when you're buying something and you have less than a 20% deposit. So say you're borrowing more than 80% of the property value, then you have to pay LMI, and it's quite expensive. It's tens of thousands of dollars. So for example, if you want to buy a $600,000 property with a 5% deposit, then that's $30,000 down, $570,000 borrowed, which is a 95% LVR. Now, the lender will normally charge you LMI to protect themselves against the risk of you defaulting. So it's important to note that LMI is not actually for your insurance, it's for the banks to cover themselves. Now, on a loan that size, LMI could be anywhere between $15,000 to $25,000, depending on the lender. And the LMI gets added to your loan amount, so it gets capitalized onto your loan. So you're borrowing your loan amount plus the LMI, and you're paying interest on it for the next 30 years. Now, LMI is sometimes a good option if that's the only choice you have. But first home buyers with this scheme, you have other options, and it's so important that you capitalize on this so you can A, avoid paying LMI, and B, get into the market so much sooner. Now, I'm going to show you exactly how the scheme works, and then I can break down how you can be eligible for the scheme. So let's say, for example, you want to buy a house. You want to buy this house, okay? That's $1 million. Normally, the deposit that you'd need is 20% of $1 million plus stamp duty. So what's 20% of $1 million? We know it to be $200,000. So normally, you need $200,000 plus stamp. Okay? But with this scheme, if you want to buy a property for $1 million, then all you need is 5% of this, which is $50,000. That is a difference of $150,000. How many years would that save you trying to save up that extra $150,000? So $1 million property, normally $200,000 plus stamp. With this scheme, $50,000 plus stamp. Now, there are also stamp duty concessions that you do get as a first home buyer, by the way, which I can also break down. Okay, so you get with the scheme $50,000 plus stamp duty, at the concessional rate. And now that's a difference if we're just looking at the deposit without the stamp of $150,000. That's massive. That will save you at least depending on how diligently you save, anywhere from like 3 to 5 years, I would say at least, to save that extra $150,000. Then what happens is you're able to get into the property sooner. This $1 million property will go up in enough value during time where you can get to an 80% LVR. Let's say you buy it for $1 million in 2026, right? What will happen? Your property would need to get to a valuation of roughly $1.187 million. Call it 1.2. To then get to an 80 LVR. And then technically you're no longer under the scheme because your property has grown in enough value, you're at an 80% LVR. Okay? So because a lot of people are concerned about the government having a guarantee over the property and whatnot. Oh no, do this part again. Some people might get concerned about having the government guarantee a portion of your property, but it won't take very long until you're going to get to an 80% LVR and you really won't be under that guarantee anymore, like it's released. So if we're looking at a few things here, one thing I want to cover off is, let's say you're buying $1 million with a 5% deposit scheme. Okay, your loan amount, if we're looking at the deposit being $50,000, your loan amount is $950. Loan, $950. Okay, which obviously means you need to be able to service that loan amount. It doesn't mean just because you're eligible for the 5% deposit scheme, it doesn't mean you automatically get that $950 from the bank. You still have to show the bank that you're able to service that, which I'll get into a little more later. Okay. The second thing I need to make sure that's a major benefit that I mentioned of the 5% deposit scheme is, say, normally when you buy at over an 80% LVR, okay, you get charged a higher interest rate from the bank because you're in LMI territory. Okay, now you're technically a higher risk to them, even though you paid the LMI. So therefore, they have rate loadings and they have higher interest rates for higher LVRs. Now, when you're buying under the 5% deposit scheme, even though you're technically borrowing at a 95% LVR, okay, because the government is guaranteeing 15% of that, you get an interest rate as if you're at an 80% LVR. And let me tell you, it's a major difference. It's a difference between, for example, a 5.9% interest rate versus a 6.3% interest rate, if not more than that. It is a massive, massive rate difference, okay? So you get the best of both worlds. You get to borrow at a high LVR, plus you get an interest rate as if you weren't borrowing at a high LVR. You get a really, really sharp interest rate, okay? And as a mortgage broker, I know with myself, I'm able to actually negotiate your interest rates so much better with lenders, okay, versus as opposed to if you're borrowing within LMI territory. So that is a major plus and upside for you. Now, this is also awesome because in October last year, the government changed lots about the scheme, okay? So first, they removed income caps completely because previously you couldn't earn more than $125,000 as an individual or $200,000 as a couple, okay, and borrow under the scheme. But that's gone. It doesn't matter if you're earning $80,000. It doesn't matter if you're earning $300,000. You can still access the scheme as long as you meet the rest of the criteria. The second thing they removed was the cap on the number of places. So previously there were only a set amount of guarantees. I think it was around 35,000 guarantees available per financial year. Okay, once they were gone, you had to wait for the next allocation. Okay, but now there's unlimited places, which means that you don't have to wait to get into the scheme. When you're ready, you go to the right lender, you meet the criteria, you're pretty much ready to go. This is one of the biggest ones, and this shook up a lot of people. They increased the property price caps. In New South Wales, it went up to $1 million. Okay, in other areas, 850,000, depending on where you're living. In Queensland and Brisbane. Okay, the third thing they did was they significantly increased the property price caps because previously it was a smaller amount. Okay, but now in New South Wales, the capital city and regional centres cap went up to $1 million. In other areas of New South Wales, it's 850. In Victoria, capital city and regional centres went up to 950,000. Queensland and Brisbane regional centres are 850. City and regional. Western Australia, Perth regional centres are $750,000. The third thing they did was they significantly increased the property price cap. So for example, in New South Wales, okay, you can now buy for up to $1 million under this scheme. Whereas previously it was anywhere from 900 to 950, if not even lower than that, depending on where you're looking to buy. Now these changes mean that way more first home buyers can now access the scheme than that they could before. Okay, if you're previously locked out because you earned too much or because the property price caps were too low, which was a really common one that I saw, okay, for the areas you wanted to buy in, that's really changed. Okay, here's why this is particularly relevant right now. We're in a very unique market environment. The Reserve Bank has raised interest rates aggressively over the past 2 years to control inflation, and according to CoreLogic data, property prices in some capital cities have already started to soften. Sydney dwelling values are down approximately 3 to 5% from their 2022 peaks, depending on the segment that they're in. Melbourne has seen similar softening in some areas. Brisbane and regional markets are still holding relatively strong, but transaction volumes have slowed significantly across the board. Now, what does that mean for first home buyers? It means you're potentially entering the market at a point where prices have already corrected from the peak, which means competition has reduced because other buyers are really sitting on the sidelines and waiting. Okay, and sellers in some cases are becoming more negotiable because properties are taking longer to sell. I'll give you a really good example. This literally happened to me yesterday. So I'm not a first home buyer. Okay, I've bought property before. We have a portfolio, but it's still very relevant to show you a reflection of the market at the moment. We were looking at this particular property, I would say 1 month ago, and it was off market. And when we looked at it, we said we want to offer X amount of money. Okay. Let's just call it, we wanted to offer $2 million for this property. Okay. The buyer said, no, we're not negotiating on $2 million. Okay. We want at least $2.5 million for this. We said, okay, no worries. Now, they took that property to market. We saw it on realestate.com, and the real estate agent also notified us that it had been taken to market. Then it sat on the market for about 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. And then with rate rises happening and everything happening in the world at the moment, those buyers started to panic and they came back to the agent, okay, who had initially come to us, and they said, do you still have those buyers at $2 million? All right. And now we're saying, now we have the upper hand here, because we can just pretty much say no, or we can try and lowball them even more. We can say, yeah, but our offer is now 1.8. It's no longer $2 million. Okay, so just to show you that sellers are starting to panic before they could take longer, okay, but they could just negotiate. They had lots of people coming through the door. They knew the market was up and they could really, really, really negotiate and get a higher price for their property. But now sellers are having to drop their prices on properties in order to negotiate because they understand that the market is starting to slow and there is less competition out there. So as a first home buyer, it's very important that you consider that and that you also understand that, because when you're going into negotiations and when you're looking at properties, as a first home buyer, it is very important for you to understand that, because it should give you more confidence to start to enter the market at this time because of less competition. There's no point waiting for there to be so much competition and you just feel good because everybody else is doing it and everybody else is buying at the moment, but then you're going to be outpriced of the market or you're going to pay overs for your property. Now, just because property is softening right now, it doesn't mean that it's going to drop forever. This is just how market cycles work, okay? Properties go up, properties go down, they go through their peaks and troughs, okay? So it's very important that you understand, just because you buy right now, it doesn't mean that your property is not going to be valued more in the next 2 to 5 years. Because if we look at history, absolutely. You buy at $1 million now, absolutely that's going to go up in 2 to 5 years, okay? But just consider that this is the current marketplace that we're in. Therefore, it is a good time for you to enter it. And like I said, you're not bidding against 10 other buyers on every property. You actually have negotiating power. Historically, the best time to buy property is not when everybody agrees the market is strong and the prices are rising. It's during the transition phase where uncertainty is high, sentiment is weak, okay, but the fundamentals of quality locations remain solid. And that's where we are right now. Okay. Like I said, I'm even buying right now. I'm not saying this to you and I'm not buying. I'm buying right now. Okay. When I find something, I'm going for it. Now, the economists at major banks are forecasting that interest rates have likely peaked and will start coming down sometime in late 2026 or 2027. When rates start falling, buyer sentiment improves, borrowing power becomes cheaper, and prices typically start to rise again. Okay, the first home buyers who position themselves now during the uncertainty are the ones who capture the entire next growth phase instead of chasing it after it's already started. So pretty much if you buy now, okay, you're buying when the sentiment is not that strong, people are a little bit scared. If you buy now, you're going to get your property for a cheaper price, okay, but then you're going to get the full growth of the property. Whereas waiting for the growth to occur and then trying to chase and step into the market, you're going to buy the same property for significantly more money. Who is eligible for the first home guarantee? Now, let me pull up exactly what the Housing Australia says. Let me pull up exactly what the Housing Australia website says about eligibility, because this is important to get right. To be eligible for the first home guarantee, you must meet all of the following criteria. You must be a natural person who is at least 18 years of age, an Australian citizen, purchasing your first home to live in as your principal place of residence, so you want to live there. Okay, you haven't owned a property in Australia before by yourself or with somebody else. And you must move into the property as your main place to live within 12 months of settlement. So you buy it, let's say now, within the next 12 months, you have to move in there. And when you move in there, you have to live in there for at least 6 months, okay, continuous time. So let's say you move in there January next year, you have to live in there at least until like the end of June. And that's it, okay? Oh, yes, and the last one is the property purchase price must not exceed the regional property price cap. So the price caps we discussed earlier, it can't be more than that. That's it. So there's no income requirement anymore. You can earn whatever you like and still qualify. I think that eligibility, that criteria is very, very fair, and it should be pretty easy for a lot of first home buyers to meet, okay, especially with the new price caps, like being $1 million in New South Wales, Victoria, $950, Queensland, $850, etc. Okay, it should be much easier for you to be able to secure a property and enter the market now. Okay, so here's a practical step-by-step process of how you get the scheme. So how do you actually go and get the guarantee scheme? Do you have to go, to the government's office and knock on their door? What do you have to do? So the first thing you need to do is get pre-approved. Go to a broker, Get them to make sure you qualify for the scheme, okay? And then get them to get you pre-approved with a lender that offers a scheme, because not every single lender offers a scheme. So for example, Commonwealth Bank offers a scheme, NAB offers a scheme, St. George offers a scheme. Lenders offer the scheme. Your broker will know who, if they're a good enough broker, they'll know who offers it, okay? And they'll get you pre-approved with that particular lender. When you get pre-approved, you'll know exactly how much you can buy for, okay? So they're going to tell you you're pre-approved to purchase a property, for example, for $1 million. Then you know when you're shopping for property, you can buy for $1 million. Otherwise, they'll tell you your maximum. When you're getting pre-approved, they're going to tell you your borrowing capacity. Okay, and they'll say, based on your deposit, your income position, this is how much you can buy for. Okay, and like I said, you get pre-approved for that amount. Pre-approvals last 3 months. So you have that for 3 months. Okay, if you don't buy within the first 3 months, it's okay. Your mortgage broker can generally just renew your pre-approval and you can go again. Okay. Then as part of this process, when you find a property, you will get your scheme position. As part of the pre-approval process, you get your scheme position so that it's secured and you make sure you've got it. Okay. And then when you purchase a property, everything just gets finalized. So you finalize your scheme position, like the broker does it for you. The broker will get the scheme position finalized for you. You'll get your loan approved, and it's pretty much as simple as that. Go to a mortgage broker, get them to figure out how much you can borrow, get them pre-approved with a lender who does the scheme, okay, and then just go for it. Okay, so here's a few final notes I want to make on the scheme. The first thing I want to mention is, and I touched on it before, your borrowing capacity is your borrowing capacity. You don't automatically get approved for 95% just because you're eligible for the scheme. So for example, if your borrowing capacity is $800,000, like that's how much the bank will lend you, then that's how much you buy. You're going to need, then effectively, that's how much you can borrow for the loan. You can't go and buy $1 million property just because you're eligible for the scheme. You have to work within that $800,000. So you're going to look at, well, okay, my borrowing capacity is, your broker will do this for you, by the way, but just so you know, your borrowing capacity is $800,000. So that's your loan. Okay. Then if we're working backwards, we'll say, okay, well then what's a 95% property of $800,000? And that's going to give us, okay, so then we work, so $800,000 loan, you work backwards from there, you divide it by 0.95, which is going to give you your property price of roughly $842,000 purchase price, okay? That's how you work it out. So you don't, like I said, just because you can borrow an amount, just because you can get eligible for the scheme doesn't mean you can borrow the whole amount and the government's going to guarantee the borrowing capacity. The government doesn't guarantee the borrowing capacity. The government guarantees the property value, okay, which is the 15% like we discussed. Now, the next thing that's important for you to understand is stamp duty concessions. So the rules for New South Wales particularly is you'll get a full concession, which means you pay $0 in stamp duty up to $800,000 purchase price. Between $800,000 and $1 million, you get a partial exemption, okay, which means they just give you like a discount on the stamp duty in that bracket. Anything over $1 million, which you wouldn't really even get the actual scheme anyway, but anything over $1 million with regards to stamp duty, you don't get any concession whatsoever. So just think about it. Your final point for both the scheme and the stamp duty is $1 million. That's your maximum. Up to 800, you're loving life because you get the stamp duty completely waived. Okay, plus you'll get the scheme. Like it's within the property price caps for the scheme. They're my final notes that I wanted to close off on. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said, it is a really, really good time and it's a very accessible way for yourself as a first home buyer to get into the market. You save so much money in LMI, plus you save yourself so much time trying to save the rest of your deposit. Okay, this scheme I think gets you into the market at least 5 years sooner, so it's really worth considering. And right now, with prices already softened in some areas and interest rates are likely at or near their peak, okay, we're in a transition phase. So the buyers who build wealth are actually the ones who act during uncertainty and not the ones who wait for certainty that never comes at the right price. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment box below. We upload new videos every single week. Thank you very much.